Sadhu.
Thank you very much, Professor. uh, Dear Dhamma friends, today, as Doctor suggested, I am going to discuss a particular interesting sutta. And let me start with paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. තථාගතස්ස භික්ඛවේ සම්මා සම්බුද්දස්ස ද්වේ ධම්ම දේශනා පරියායේන භවಂತಿ පාපම් පාපකතෝ පස්සථාති අයං පඨමා ධම්ම දේශනා පාපම් පාපකතෝ දිස්වා අත්ත නිබ්බින්දත විරජ්‍යත විමුච්ඡතාති අයං ဒ ුතියා ධම්ම දේශනාති.
Sadhu,
Dear
sadhu,
friends in
sadhu.
Dhamma, so actually today we are hoping to discuss about two types of sermons, two types of Dhamma teachings of the Buddha. So those are recorded in the Itivuttaka Pali, as just I have mentioned. So Itivuttaka Pali comes in the Khuddaka Nikaya, the shorter discourses of the Buddha, and this is one of the very interesting sutta where Buddha concisely highlighted the two teachings. So the first teaching he says, Papam papakato passathati. So you got to see evil as evil. And the second teaching is called Papam papakato disva tatta nibbindata virajyata vimucchathati. So that is the topic actually I have highlighted. So having seen evil as evil, you got to rid of it, be detached from it, and freed from it. So now we have a question. So that is, what are the evil? So these are different levels of evil we can recognize, and we can say fairly gross type of evils, or we can call them as bodily misconduct, verbal misconduct, and then even the mental misconduct. And most of those are quite familiar to us as Buddhists. And bodily misconduct like killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, so those are recognized as the gross type of bodily misconduct. And then there are verbal misconduct, that is lying, harsh speech, divisive speech, slandering, that type of verbal misconduct. And then we have the gross kind of mental misconduct, that is vicious or kind of unethical type of greed, and then the ill will, and then the misunderstanding, or what we call as the michaditi, the wrong view. Now these typically recognized as the 10 types of unwholesome deeds, and they are fairly restrained to the morality. So we know that as Buddhists, even just now we observed precepts, 5 precepts right now. So that basically has reduced the amount of possibility of making kind of very grievous or very heavy type of bodily misconduct and verbal misconduct. Now another interesting part is, now we all as human beings, so these bodily misconduct and verbal misconduct, actually we all can understand those are necessary for the well-being of the society, and it is not merely the Buddhist, as human beings, so it is necessary to maintain kind of an ethical, fairly cohesive kind of a society. So as a result of that, we all can agree, yes, it is true that we should not kill, we should not steal, we should not involve in the sexual misconduct, we should not lie, and we should not misuse or participate in the intoxicants, etc. So we can basically understand these things. So, and again Buddha highlights them as the gross kind of misconduct, gross kinds of defilements, Olarika Upakkilesa. So this is a term referred in the Pansuddhovaka Sutta. Olarika upakkilesa. So those are the gross kind of upakkilesa, gross defilements. So when our mind get really afflicted based on these kind of defilements, and that indicates kind of a gravity that one can even get into the transgression of the precepts and get on to killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, taking intoxicants, involved in the divisive speech, harsh speech. So these are, we all can understand, fairly gross kind of misconduct, gross kind of misbehavior, or gross kind of defilements operating at that time. Now, one of the important thing is, even we all can understand these are misconducts or misdeeds, but still many people are involved with that. So even though we can understand, so these things have a greater consequences, but still many people are involved with that. So we can see the society, how much people are involved in killing, how much they are involved in various types of stealing, and even the sexual misconduct, and how much cheating and lying and all these falsehood. So you can see, even though we as sensible human beings who can understand the value of these ethical precepts, still not many are following. So one of the great teachings of the Buddha is therefore papam papakato pasatati. So therefore Buddha highlights, you need to know that evil as evil. Nowadays we know that even in our country, majority being Buddhist, there's a fair amount of crime going on, fair amount of killing going on, fair amount of stealing going on. So likewise, although we are a kind of a Buddhist country, but still fair amount of unwholesome deeds are continuously carried on. So one of the interesting and the prominent teaching of the Buddha is Sabba Papa Sakarana. So don't do any unwholesome deed. So first of all, in that sense, we have to adhere to that teaching. So we as Buddhists, we need to understand these gross kinds of defilements, gross kinds of misdeeds. At the same time, we should avoid from that. So this not involved in the misdeeds is one of the important factor of the Buddha's teaching. We may talk with various philosophical things, but how about not doing the evil deeds, not involved in killing, not involved in, say, stealing, not involved in sexual misconduct, not involved in lying? I mean, these things are very basics in a way. So at least we should preserve, or we should adhere to these basic principles. So therefore, the first teaching of the Buddha, papam papakato pasathati. So we should know, okay, they are the evil deeds. So first of all, we need to understand what are the evil, and so I am just given a very gross kinds of evil, and at least we as human beings, expecting our own well-being and expecting everyone's well-being, so we need to adhere to that thing. Okay, I should avoid all these misdeeds. It doesn't mean I can immediately purify myself, but with respect of the Buddha, with the respect of the Dhamma, to the Sangha, to the precepts, so we should try our best to avoid all these misdeeds. And then we can get on to more subtle level. So that is where Dhamma actually help us. So Buddha didn't stop here. Even though we are adhere to precepts, even though we are observing precepts, still our minds are impure. So fair amount of defilements are again and again appearing in the mind. We get inflicted by these defilements, and again mind get corrupted or cluttered by these defilements. So even though we are protecting the sila, the morality, but the mind is still quite vulnerable for all these different kinds of defilements. So there should be another level of solution to purify the mind. So that is one level is the samadhi sikkha, where one is trying to develop some amount of mindfulness or develop some amount of concentration. The mental development is involved, and you are trying to temporarily subside the defilements. If the mind is cluttered with anger, so as we have heard from last week, so if the mind is cluttered with anger, there may be a different strategies, different methods to overcome that anger. If mind being overwhelmed by lust, there should be different ways to overcome that lust. Similarly, if the mind being afflicted by kind of envy, jealousy, that kind of things, okay, we can to some extent subside these defilements, but only for a short time. Say you are in a kind of a concentrated situation, you are in a samadhi. So to that period, okay, the mind is free from defilements. But still, once you come out of that, still you become quite vulnerable to again and again subjected to those different kinds of defilements. So then why are we talking about another solution, another level of solution? So it is quite obvious. So these defilements in that sense are constantly appearing. If we are not mindful, they constantly appearing in the mind. And again, there's a higher possibility we being carried away by the defilements. We can become a victim of the kind of a defilement. So then probably we might can have a kind of a wonder from where these defilements have begin. So Buddha actually highlighted, so you can't find out a starting point from where the mind become defiled, whether it is a million years ago, billion years ago, whether this mind has defiled. So we can't say like that. It is very much like unconceivable, and it is very, very far away. And from those ancient times, the mind has become defiled. As a result of that, we are keep on wandering in this samsara. And but the beautiful thing is, still we have an opportunity. Still we have a potential to free the mind, to make the mind undefiled, to make the mind pure. So as human beings, we have that great potential. So that is something the good news. So Buddha emphasized these minds are constantly being subjected to various defilements, and it is happening from long time, very far away time, from eons. But still, as a result of the coming across of the teaching, there's a higher potential, higher possibility that we have an ability to purify the mind. Now, then, that is the interesting part. How to purify the mind. So, those are interesting, and that is where the Buddha highlights in mindfulness practice, where one have a possibility of purifying the mind. And various techniques, therefore, Buddha preach in order to purify the mind. Now, in order to purify the mind, we first have to understand, okay, there is a problem, there is a shortcoming, there is a kind of a defiled mind. So it's a kind of a humble acceptance. So we become honest, we become humble, and we are well grounded, and we understand, okay, there is something to fix. I have to find out a solution. There is something going wrong. And as we discussed even yesterday at Kalalgoda, so if we consider a little child, so say born few months ago, so may probably comparatively there may be a kind of a less defiled mind to some extent, but there are underneath defilements operating. But comparatively, we can say a kind of a very soft or very little bit of pure mind. But gradually, as we are growing up, unfortunately, due to various reasons, our mind become cluttered, our mind become engrossed with various defilements, time to time affected by various defilements. So ultimately, when we become an adult, it is not that we are being purifying our mind, but unfortunately, we have fully cluttered the mind. We have made our mind more defiled. We have made our mind more polluted, more cluttered, more tensed, more fixed. So in that sense, we have a kind of a problem then, because we are going through the education, we are doing various things, we are trying our best to be a good person, but still ultimately when we recognize, okay, when I am born to this society, when I am born to this world, okay, I had kind of a account of defilements, my opening balance, But unfortunately, with time, so that opening balance has increased. So that the amount of defilements have increased. So then I have to fix it. So am I going to die with more defilements, a load of defilements? Or am I going to do something before I die? So then we as human beings, sensible human beings, we have a kind of a responsibility because I am the one ultimately going to suffer. Rather than simply looking at this short lifespan, so we have to see the big picture. As Buddha mentioned, for long, long time, this mind has defiled. So he, in a way, warned the monks. He telling this in the Gaddulabadda Sutta, Pasmatiha bhikkave, bhikkhuna, abhikkanam sakanchittang pacchavekkitabbang. So monks, you should frequently reflect. Dīgarattang idanchittang sankilittang, ragena dosena mohenati. For a long time, this mind has defiled from lust, hatred, and delusion. So you can see Buddha has requested us to be humble. Buddha has requested us to be recognize, okay, we are in a little bit of trouble because our minds have come for a long time with a load of defilements. Then on the other hand, so he give a good message. So that is where we can have a kind of a path. There's a possibility to make it pure as well, even though it has been defiled for a long time, but still there's a higher possibility, potential is still available to make it pure. Now, as I mentioned, one level is the calming down of the gross defilements by means of the morality, and then we can make use of certain other samatha practices like Buddha Anusati, like say loving kindness meditation, say Asubha meditation. So all these are different techniques, and even kind of other some blissful experiences. Maybe to some extent we can make the mind somewhat uh, undefiled for a temporary period of time, but still there's a potential to again become defiled. So even though temporarily the mind is free from defilements, still once we remove that concentration, or the concentration becomes shallow, then again mind get defiled. Then there should be a kind of a more sensible solution. So that is where we start from the very basics. So we are trying to develop mindfulness and trying to avoid the compulsive thinking, maybe conceptual proliferation. Time to time, again and again, we are paying attention to our, say, foot, or paying attention to the breath, to maybe rising and falling, so etc. So it's a kind of a way. So we are, rather than promoting compulsive thinking, rather than promoting conceptual proliferation, so now we are trying to break that cycle, that vicious thinking, and time to time ground ourselves, time to time establish mindfulness. So as we are progressing, then we can say, okay, so this frequency of grounding ourselves become more and more improved, and as a result of that, for a considerable period of time, okay, I am maintaining my attention on a selected object. That object actually is an undefiled or less defiled kind of an object. It does not promote defilements. Instead, it promotes some other positive qualities like mindfulness, like wisdom, like faith, effort. So those are the kind of the positive aspects. Those are necessary to do this purification process. And so we are now sort of strengthening those factors. So again and again, assume that we are involved in this practice. So again and again, we are trying to strengthen those positive qualities in the mind. Now assume now you are able to establish mindfulness. So you are able to practice for a considerable period of time. So you can establish mindfulness for a while now. You can maintain your attention, say for example, on breathing for considerable period of time. Say you are doing walking meditation, you are able to establish mindfulness for a long time. So that gives some confidence. Okay, during that time, my mind is less defiled. I am able to do walking meditation for say half an hour. So during that time, the mind is less defiled. I am able to practice anapanasati for half an hour. Okay, during that time, the mind is less defiled. So we understand, okay, this is a kind of a practical approach. And during that practice, okay, I am capable of maintaining the mind less defiled. So it's a kind of a relief because we thought that we have no escape, we have no solution. But now we feel little confident, okay, if I am maintaining mindfulness, okay, I know what's really going on. And therefore, Buddha mentioned, Yani sotani lokasmi satite sang nivarana. Sotanang sangvaram brumi panyayete pitiyere. So there are so much of floods of defilements. So he mentions kind of here like a flood, so powerful. So typically our minds being dragged away by the flood. But now we have a solution. So that is the kind of the mindfulness, where all these floods can be stopped for a while, can be brought to a standstill by applying the brakes of the mindfulness. So the moment that you establish mindfulness, so that momentum of that defilement flood can be stopped. But still, that is not the complete solution. Then Buddha recommend the wisdom. Panyayete pitiyare. So you need to develop wisdom in order to completely uproot the defilements. So the mindfulness helps us to sort of highlight the defilements. Mindfulness is very much like a monitoring process. So it will tell us, it will indicate us, okay, now the mind is defiled. Now you are having kind of a lustful mind. Now you are having kind of an angry mind. Now there's a jealousy. Now there's an anger. Now there is lust. Now there is envy. Now there is conceit. So likewise, the function of the mindfulness in that sense is a kind of an indicator that's constantly observing and then indicate, okay, now what is the state of the mind. Now, even for that, we need to, in a way, have to practically develop that. It may not happen overnight. It may not happen if we simply discard or neglect the practice. So the skill that the mindfulness provides us also depends on how much we are practicing. But the solution may have to start from the very basics, starting from the body, development of the body awareness, and then slowly expanding that to the level of maybe to the feelings. Okay, now you are capable of understanding some emotions, and now you are even capable of understanding that emotions are coming and available, and sometimes you being overwhelmed by emotions, and sometimes still you, even though you know that there's a certain defilement operating in the mind, you still can't stop yourself. It's so powerful, so strong, and it is overwhelming you, it is overpowering you. By the way, you know that, you are aware of that. So in order to find out a solution, we should know first, okay, there is a problem, there are certain shortcomings, there are still some faults. So first of all, we need to honestly, humbly admit, okay, there is something to fix. So that's why Buddha highlight here, papam papakato pasatahati. You should see there is evil. You should see there are defilements. You should see that something is wrong. And once you see that, once you notice that, okay, now you are responsible to finding out a solution. So Buddhas merely indicate the path. Buddhas merely give us various tools. He may show the path, but we ourselves have to develop the path. We ourselves have to develop those skills within ourselves. So Buddha find out a solution for his problem, and he indicated, okay, I have found a solution. It worked well. I am purified now. Now you guys also have to practice. Then you too can purify yourself. And now suppose we are developing mindfulness, we are able to maintain our attention. And as a result of that, suppose now we are start practicing clear comprehension. We are adding the clear comprehension also to the mindfulness practice, and we are carefully observing different phenomena. It may be bodily phenomena, it may be feelings, it may be sensations, it may be emotions, it may be even thoughts. So, likewise, now we are expanding the mindfulness practice. Now, as a result of that, slowly we may understand okay, now I have little breaks. Now, I am not acting compulsively, I'm not acting sort of more harsh manner. I have more little control to myself now. And certain defilements are still appearing, but I know about it, but I can recognize them. And the important part of the practice is that we are capable of detached from the experience and looking at it objectively. Say, for example, when the anger is available, so we are, rather than telling, okay, I am angry, and we are going to arguments and getting to quarrels and say fights, now we are able to step back and watch, okay, there is anger, there is an angry thought, there is lust, there is envy, there is jealousy, there is conceit. So likewise, now this step back and watch defilement as a defilement. It is no more a kind of my defilement, but it is a defilement. It is a kind of an impediment. It's a kind of an impurity. It's a kind of a condition. Currently, the mind is subjected to a kind of a conditioning. Now, this is a different way of looking at it. So, the wisdom approach, therefore, the purification process help us to look at the defilement from a different angle now. Previously, very much like we are a little afraid of defilements, I want to get rid of defilements. So that was the kind of the attitude previously we might had. But now, slowly, as we are developing mindfulness, as we are developing the possibility of looking at various, say, bodily sensations, various, say, feelings, now we are learning a different skill. So, body is going through various processes, and I can look at them like an outsider. Body is going through various feelings, I can look at them as an outsider. So the mind is going through various pleasures and maybe little despair and all these sorrows, but still I can step back and watch mindfully like an outsider. Now that skill being developed from the beginning from Kayanupassana, and now we can use it even at the level of mental development. Now rather than being afraid of the defilement, now we are step back and watch the defilement. It is not my defilement. It is a defilement. It is not my anger, it is anger. It is not my lust, it is lust. It is not my envy, it is just envy. So, likewise, we are now detached from the process, and still we humbly admit okay, currently this mind is going through this kind of a defilement. So, Buddha very beautifully highlight this point in the Sandittika Sutta, where he mentioned this, this Dhamma is so immediate. If you are able to understand a defilement at that very moment, so that is the immediacy of this Dhamma. You are not trapped in the defilement. You are not being a slave to that defilement. You are not a victim of that defilement. Rather, you are capable of step back and watch that defilement, recognize that defilement. That is the Sandittika Dhamma. That is the quality of the Dhamma. That is the quality of the teaching of the Buddha, where you are capable of recognizing a defilement as a defilement. You are recognizing a mental state as a mental state. It is not mine, it is not me, it is not myself. It is a defilement. It is now you are looking at it objectively. Rather than claiming it as mine or being suffering from that or being stressed by that, rather you are capable of maintaining a kind of a distance, and you are able to detach from it and watch it as a defilement. Now, as we are continuing, time to time, now we are getting another refuge. We are getting another kind of a release, because as we are further and further continuing the practice, so this very observation is sort of generating fair amount of wisdom to the mind. So suppose that you are developing anapanasati, or you are developing the dhatu manasikara, the elements meditation, or suppose you are practicing Vedanupasana, observing various feelings and even the thoughts. This very observation actually give you a kind of an understanding how they are behaving. It is not that you are borrowing the knowledge from the book, rather you are now depending on the direct experience. Time to time you are observing various bodily sensations. You are observing various, say, thoughts, feelings. Now, all of them are behaving in a certain manner, very common manner. They have the nature to arise and they have the nature to pass away. They have the nature to come and they have the nature to go. They simply appear and then disappear, coming and going. So these are kind of a common characteristic. Again and again, more and more you are looking at them. Now you become more and more detached from them. So this very understanding is capable of detaching the mind further and further. And ultimately, everything like mixed up, like a flux, and you feel okay. I mean, no point of struggling with this. Let it be, because they have their own agenda. I have no control. They are constantly subjected to arising and passing away, constantly oppressed by this impermanent situation, and I have no control. I can't say they are belong to me. I can't say they are mine, and I can't recognize with them. I can't identify with them. They behave their own way. So why I bother? Now you are looking at them in a different way, and slowly you become more and more detached. Now we can see, as Buddha even highlighted at the second part, tatta nibbindata virajyata vimucchathati. Even that we can apply here. So as we are seeing them, even at the practice, different phenomena, maybe bodily phenomena, feelings, thoughts, etc., and slowly this detachment arise, disenchantment arise, and now we are capable of looking at them objectively more and more, and slowly mind become very calm, quiet. Time to time you experience complete absence of kind of a cluttered nature of the mind. So now you time to time experience kind of clarity of mind, undefiled state of mind. And as you are continuing, sometimes, maybe accidentally even, mind get completely released. Mind is not attached with anything, not grasping anything, not holding anything. And kind of a state of mind can arise. So that state of mind is very, in a way, unnoticeable. It may have happened only for a moment and it is not noticed. But as you are continuing, so this event may recur, may repeat. Now it happened for 2 moments, now it happened 5 moments, now it happened 10 moments. So likewise, it is repeatedly happening now. Now slowly the yogi, the practitioner start noticing that. Okay, I am continuing the practice, I am continuing the observation. At a given moment, okay, mind let go of everything and it become completely detached, completely released, and you lose your orientation and you are very much like experience a different domain. So this is something to notice. This is actually a kind of a breakthrough in vipassana, where you are capable of not attached with anything in the world, not associating anything in the world. So in our practice, so if you are able to recognize such state, even though it is utterly boring, even though it is not entertaining any kind of I-ness, any personality view, or any kind of a identification, but we need to notice that. We need to allow that process to happen. We need to allow that process to expand, and we have to give trust to the Buddha, and we need to appreciate that event. We need to appreciate that instance. And slowly, slowly, as we are familiarizing with this process, now we are slowly stepping on to that area. Now we are finding out another stage of our practice where a completely undefiled state of mind now we are recognizing. It is a kind of pure state of mind. Previously, we couldn't even appreciate that, because what we typically appreciate, what we give more marks are to the levels, to the state of mind where I is highlighted, where my mind is highlighted, or where I-ness is highlighted. But this particular released event, there is no I, and you can't recognize a kind of a person. You can't recognize an individual. The typical conventional norms are not more, no more there. So that's why it's utterly boring, or you can't recognize its value. So typical value system that you have in your mind are completely irrelevant to that kind of a state. So the mind is completely blank or kind of empty. So how are we going to give a typical value system? So that means, so typically we judge based on the kind of very mundane kind of a value judgment. But when the mind is released, so how are we going to apply that kind of a judgment, typical value system to such situation? So that is why we keep on missing this point. We keep on ignoring this point. And when we are able to recognize this place, we are recognize this mental state, and we understand, okay, there is something there. So Buddha has pointed it out. Buddha has highlighted that. Buddha asks us to value that. And interestingly, Buddha asks us to be in that. So that's a very interesting point in the Vitakka Sutta, again in the Itiuttaka Pali. So Buddha mentioned, Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata Paviveka Ratu. So Buddha mentioned, okay, you got to incline towards the restful state of the mind. So here, so Buddha is in a way kind of guiding us towards that restful state of the mind, release state of the mind. Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata, Paviveka Ratu. So typically, as I mentioned before, our minds are quite agitated, constantly subjected to various ups and downs, and constantly at in the different extremes, always kind of going through some impulsive behavior, always oscillating, constantly going to some pulsations. But when the mind is released, when the mind is not attached with anything, it's very much like you are grounded. You have come back home. You're completely released, completely neutralized. There is no more agitation, there is no stress. So that state of mind, and Buddha highlights, okay, you got to incline towards that state, give some marks to that state, give some value to that state, even though you can't really appreciate it to 100%, but try to be little inclined towards that direction. So that's a kind of an advice that Buddha is giving. Paviveka Ramo Bhikkave Viharata Paviveka Rato. So what is the advantage? Advantage also Buddha highlights there. Tesango Bhikkave Tumhakam Paviveka Ramanang Viharatang Paviveka Ratanang. So when you are inclined towards that restful state of mind, when you are a little bit attached to that, you want to be in that. Eso vitakko bahulang samuda charissati. Later, you get a kind of a thought in your mind. So at that state, actually, there are no thoughts. You are simply being in a kind of an empty space. But as you are continuing that practice, later you get a reflection to the mind. What is the reflection? What is the thought? King akusalam, king appahinam, king pajahamati. What is unwholesome? What is said the unwholesome? What are these unwholesome deeds? King appahinam. So what are still available unwholesome states in this mind. Kim pajahamati. So how am I going to remove it? So you can see, so mind has a kind of a potential. So if we are able to touch that pure state of mind, at least for a moment, at least for a temporary state, so it's kind of a generate kind of a possibility, kind of a momentum. So now mind is inclined towards that purity. So mind is now requesting such purity. It has tasted kind of a purity. It has tasted a complete detached state of mind, a released state of mind, a freed state of mind. Now it is inviting, is asking you, why don't you purify me? Why can't you release me? Why are you sort of torturing me? Why can't you release me? Now the mind is asking. It is not that I am trying to sort of forcefully purify, but mind has now little tasted. Mind has tasted the freedom, and now mind is requesting, why don't you purify me? There's a possibility. Can you remember at that moment you are quite purified? So why can't you maintain that? During that time, your mind is very relaxed, no tension, no defilements. So why can't you maintain that? It's a kind of a request, kind of an inner yearning, inner request coming from the mind. Please purify myself. So likewise, so Buddha in a way catalyzing the thing. Now, as a result of that, now okay, we have kind of an inner urge to purify the mind. So the potential is available. Now you have seen the potential. You have touched the potential. It's a matter of expanding that potential. So that's why further Buddha encouraging that papang pasata papam papakato diswa tatta nibbindata. So you got to, rather than entertain the defilement, you have to be detached from the defilement. You are discouraging the defilement. You are encouraging the undefiled state of mind. You are encouraging the pure state of mind. And be detached from the defilements, be detached from the unwholesome side, be detached from the conditioned state of the mind, and we are promoting the release state of the mind, vimuchatati. So you are, with the highlights, okay, you got to promote the freedom of the mind. And dutiyadam desa. So this is the second type of the teaching of the Buddha. So therefore we can see, so Buddha as a universal teacher, so he purified himself first. And now he is sort of encouraging us to purify ourselves. And even before he delivered the Satipatthana Sutta, so he highlights that Ekaino ayam bhikkhave maggo sattanang visuddhya. So monks, there is a direct path for the purification. Soka pariddavanam samatikkamai. In order to overcome all the sorrows and lamentation, dukkha domanassanam atthangamai, to overcome all different kinds of suffering, sorrows, and the despair. So there is a direct path. There is a kind of a strong path. So he, in a way, confidently tell that. He has a lot of confidence. Yes, I have done that. I am quite sure about it. It's an ancient path. It is not kind of a something that only unique to the Gautama Buddha. And he himself mentioned this is a very ancient path. And if you can remember the Arya Vansa Sutta as Sri Lankan Buddhists, so we all quite familiar with this Arya Vansa Sutta. So Buddha highlights it's coming as a kind of a noble lineage that we have to have Bhavana Ramataya, Bhavana Ratya. So you are geared to develop the mind. You are inclined towards the development of the mind. And Pahana Ramataya, Pahana Ratya. You are inclined towards the purification of the mind, abandonment of the defilements, abandonment of the impurities. It's an ancient practice. It is coming from the lineage, from the noble lineage, from many, many Buddhas, from many, many Pacheka Buddhas, from many, many Arahants. It's a noble lineage. So Buddha encouraged us to join with that lineage. And interestingly, and you can see how clever he is, he mentioned, Neva attunkanseti no parangwambet, no parangwambeheti. Sohi tatta dakko, analaso, sampajano, patissato. Ayang uccati bhikkave bhikkhu, porane agganye ariyavanse tito. So Buddha mentioned, even though now you know, okay, I have to do it, I have time to time experience that purity of the mind, undefiled state of the mind. So you found you are a little bit clever in that sense. You have worked hard, you achieved something. At least time to time, I am capable of maintaining a pure state of mind. But with the highlights, neva tukkanseti. So you are not extolling yourself. You are not looking down others, even using that skill. You can see how beautifully that Buddha kind of giving us a solution. Because even this very skill, even this very solution can create kind of a conceit in our mind, thinking, okay, I am the most clever person, I am the, say, the vipassana, the best vipassana yogi, all others are sort of ignorant. So it can create kind of a conceit in us. So Buddha even avoids that. Buddha mentioned, okay, don't do that. Neva tukkanseti no parangvambeti. Don't disparage others, don't extol yourself. Sohi tatta dakko, and be skillful in the path, be skillful in the development of the path. Sampajano, be always attentive, diligent. Patissato, be ever mindful. Because the defilements have no excuse. Don't expect defilements to happen or defilements to occur, defilements to appear while you are meditating. They may not appear because you are quite ready, you are diligent. So at that time, defilements may not appear. But say when you are slack in your mindfulness, when you are simply traveling, when you are talking with others, when you are, say, traveling, or when you are engaged with various other activities, then a higher possibility, higher vulnerability is there for the defilements to arise. So they are basically merciless. So defilements don't care whether you are practicing only at that time I have to appear. There is no such agreement. So they may find an excuse and they simply infiltrate. They simply overwhelm your mind. They will catch yourself. So then when are we going to practice? Is it only at Kalalwada? Is it only at on our cushion? Is it only during our practice session? Is it the only time the defilement is going to appear? Then we need to understand, yes, I mean, these defilements are, I mean, always like intruders. They are always like trying to invade the mind. So I have to be quite diligent. I have to maintain kind of a wakefulness. I have to be on guard. I have to look after my mind. I should not allow these defilements to overwhelm the mind, take the mind for granted. So you are now being more diligent. You are taking care of yourself. So the whole practice become kind of a life experience. So you are now trying to safeguard you, purify as much as possible, be diligent, because there is no mercy coming from the defilements. And as we are continuing, so slowly, probably, we are able to experience undefiled mind, pure mind, unattached mind, non-grasping mind for a more and more considerable period of time. So then probably slowly we can understand, okay, something is going on. The purification has started. It's a matter of getting allowing that process. Let the mind being continuously subjected to that process. I should not sort of hinder that process. Now the process has begun. So the Dhamma is operating in that mind. So the Dhammas are now operating in the mind. It's not that I am doing it. Rather, Dhammas are helping for the purification. It is not I am making it, is not my process. Now even that I making, mind making has to be stopped. We are not highlighting as a person now. We are not highlighting as a I now. Rather, we understand even that eye making, mind making, highlighting as a person. So those are also very subtle defilements operating in the mind. So you can see, so different levels of understanding, different levels of defilements we are talking. And slowly the purification process is going on, is cutting off different levels of defilements. So as we are continuing, so different levels of defilements are keep on fading off, tapering off. And so Buddha mentioned, okay, the one may experience kind of calmness, relaxed state of mind, released state of mind quite often. So one day we would be able to completely purify our minds. So when the path is to continue the practice, and the encouragement is coming from the Buddha again and again. So that's why he mentioned, okay, in this particular sutta, uh, in this Desana Sutta, Tathagatassa Buddhassa Sabba Bhutanukampino Pariyaya Vachanam Passa Dvecha Dhamma Pakasita. For the compassionate one, the Tathagata, the compassionate one for all beings, there are two kinds of Dhamma teachings. Papakang Pap Passata Tatta Med Etam Tatta Chapi Virajjata. So he highlights, so you got to see the defilements as defilements, unwholesome deeds as unwholesome deeds, and you got to detach from them. Tato viratta chitta say dukkha santam karissada. And by promoting that detached state of mind, by by released mind, and now you would be have a possibility, a potential to completely free from suffering. So with that note, I like to conclude today's Dhamma sermon. Thank you very much for attentive listening.